Sometimes, silence itself can be the most chilling sound. In the winter of late 1944, a quiet dread settled over the Ardennes before the storm. Then, without warning, the world shattered. A thunderous roar tore through the cold, innocent air, signaling the start of something truly unimaginable. Out of the frozen mists, a desperate steel tide rolled forward. Hitler's last gamble was unleashed, a shock offensive meant to defy the very end. Yet, in the face of overwhelming odds, men stood firm. Their resolve, a beacon against the onslaught, would forge legends in the bitter snow. By late 1944, the tide of war had turned decisively. Nazi Germany, battered and bleeding, faced collapse, squeezed between mighty Allied armies. But one man, consumed by delusion, refused to yield. Hitler, clutching at straws, conceived a plan of unthinkable audacity, a final, reckless roll of the dice. This was the Ardennes, a quiet, forgotten corner of Europe, a place of deep woods and biting cold, soon to become a winter bloodbath. Here, ordinary men would face not just each other, but the brutal, unforgiving embrace of winter itself, a cruel test of human endurance. Nazi Germany's resources were dwindling, their once mighty war machine faltering. Yet, they gathered everything for this one. Desperate thrust. This wasn't just a battle, it was a monumental gamble, a last-ditch attempt to split Allied lines and seize victory from the jaws of defeat. In December 1944, a storm of men and steel would erupt from the dense woods, shocking the world and forever changing the course of history. The fate of nations hung precariously. The implications of this audacious move rippled across the globe, threatening to unravel Allied unity. Join us as we journey into the heart of that brutal winter, reconstructing the courage, chaos, and pivotal moments of a defining conflict. The Battle of the Bulge, a story of human spirit, sacrifice, and the enduring legacy of a winter bloodbath that scarred a generation. By late 1944, the tide had truly turned. On the Western Front, the Allies pressed forward, a relentless march toward the heart of Nazi Germany. Meanwhile, in the East, the Soviet Union's thunderous advance pushed westward, leaving ruin in its wake. Nazi Germany was caught in a brutal vice. The strategic landscape for Nazi Germany was dire. Encirclement was a looming shadow, closing in from every direction. Years of relentless war had taken an unimaginable toll. Nazi Germany's once mighty legions were now battered, bleeding, and profoundly weary. Yet, in the Führer's bunker, reality seemed a distant whisper. Hitler's mind clung to a desperate, almost delusional vision of victory. He sought one final, audacious gamble, one last swing of the axe that might yet splinter the Allied resolve and turn the tide. This was to be Operation Watch on the Rhine, a massive surprise counteroffensive. Hitler's last, desperate throw of the dice. Its aim was bold, to smash through the Allied lines, driving a wedge between the British and American armies. A truly audacious plan. And then, to capture Antwerp, the vital Allied port. This would cripple their supply lines and perhaps force a separate peace. Secrecy was paramount. Every movement, every whisper of the plan was hidden beneath a veil of utter darkness and deception. The chosen battlefield, the Ardennes, a familiar, rugged landscape that had once before shielded a surprise Nazi German attack in 1940. The Allies believed it too difficult for a large-scale offensive, thinly defended. This complacency was exactly what Hitler sought to exploit. Under the cloak of winter's embrace, Nazi Germany began to mass its last reserves, a ghost army gathering in the deep, silent woods. The commanders were men like Model and Manteuffel, seasoned veterans. They understood the odds, but followed orders regardless. The forces were a desperate mix, battle-hardened veterans alongside raw, barely trained young men, called to their last duty. Their armored divisions, though fewer, still boasted the mighty Tiger and Panther tanks. Beasts of steel, powerful, yet precious few. But fuel was a crippling problem. The lifeblood of Blitzkrieg was running dry, threatening to stall their advance almost before it began. The once dominant Luftwaffe was a shadow, its skies now owned by the Allies. Air support would be almost non-existent. Logistics were a nightmare. Every bullet, every drop of oil, every ration was hard-won. A testament to Nazi Germany's dwindling resources. Their doctrine still called for speed, for decisive penetration. Yet the ghost of Blitzkrieg was now shackled by harsh reality and scarcity. Tactical preparations were meticulous. Stealthy movements, camouflage, and the element of total surprise were their only real allies. Across the line, Allied forces felt a fragile confidence. The war was surely nearing its end, they thought. Peace just around the corner. General Eisenhower, overseeing the vast Western Front, focused on the advance. The Ardennes seemed merely a quiet, holding sector. American units, many new to the front, held this sector. Stretched thin, they expected little action in the seemingly impenetrable woods. To the north, the British forces continued their methodical advance, unaware of the brewing storm that would soon engulf their American allies. Further south, the French armies, recovering and reinforcing, also perceived the Ardennes as a safe, quiet flank. Nothing to fear. The Allies possessed overwhelming armored superiority. Their tanks were numerous, well supplied, and largely ready for a fight. And above all, absolute air superiority. Allied planes dominated the skies, a comforting blanket for troops below, a terror for their enemy. Their logistical machine, fueled by the legendary Red Ball Express, ensured a constant flow of supplies. The envy of any army, Allied doctrine emphasized combined arms and overwhelming firepower. They planned for a grinding advance, not a sudden, desperate thrust. Defensive positions, while present, were thinly spread across the Ardennes. No one truly expected a full-scale assault there. The harsh winter of 1944 had already set in, its bitter cold adding another layer of challenge to an already weary continent. A heavy mist settled over the Ardennes, a silent shroud that both concealed the approaching danger and lulled the defenders. Complacency, a quiet confidence, had crept into the Allied lines. They felt safe, perhaps too safe in the deep, silent woods. On the other side, Nazi Germany made its final, hushed preparations. Every man knew the immense stakes, the desperate nature of their mission. The air crackled with a cold, almost unbearable tension. An entire army held its breath, poised on the precipice of destiny. The eve of battle. Unknowing peace for some, grim determination for others. The stage was set for a winter bloodbath. As 1944 drew to a close, Hitler's last gamble, a desperate lunge from a dying empire, was about to shatter the silence of winter. That December of 1944, the Ardennes lay quiet, a deceptive peace. Winter's cold breath promised a respite from war's weariness. But deep within Nazi Germany, a desperate gamble was being forged. Hitler's last, audacious throw of the dice. And so, on that fateful morning of December 16, 1944, the silence shattered. The world held its breath once more. For many Allied soldiers, it was a quiet sector, a chance to rest. They never imagined the storm brewing just beyond the trees. The enemy was coming, a ghost in the dawn, leveraging every ounce of surprise against a weary, unsuspecting foe. Nature itself seemed to conspire, weaving a thick blanket of fog and snow. It was a cruel gift to Nazi Germany. Allied air superiority, a crucial advantage, was neutralized. The eyes in the sky were suddenly blind, trapped on the ground. Our wings, which had so often turned the tide, were clipped. The cold, wet air became a shield for the aggressor.
In this cloak of winter, Nazi Germany found its perfect moment, its silent, deadly advantage in the unforgiving Ardennes.
Beneath the shroud of fog, the ground trembled with anticipation, awaiting the thunder, that would tear apart the quiet winter. Then, without warning, the world exploded. An overwhelming artillery barrage, a symphony of destruction, tore through the dawn. Sleep gave way to sheer terror. The earth itself seemed to be consumed by Nazi Germany's fury, a brutal awakening for all. Amidst the chaos, bizarre light pierced the gloom. Artificial moonlight, it cast dancing shadows, adding to the nightmare's surreal grip.
In that fractured light, men saw ghosts, friends, and enemies. The world was a canvas of terror, illuminated for a moment. Through the smoke and the scream of shells, Nazi Germany's Panzer divisions advanced. Their momentum was relentless, their will unbroken. Like a cold steel tide, they pushed forward, churning through snow and fear. The Blitzkrieg was reborn, cloaked in winter's chill. Foot soldiers followed, a wave of steel and humanity. The initial success was shocking, leaving Allied defenders reeling in its wake. Chaos was their ally, confusion their weapon. The sheer speed of the assault tore gaping holes in the Allied lines. Each swift advance fueled Nazi Germany's audacious plan. But behind their grim success, a darker stain would soon appear. The path ahead was clear, and nothing, it seemed, could halt the relentless surge of Nazi Germany's winter blitzkrieg. Near Malmedy, an American battery, weary and outmatched, surrendered. These men believed the war's harsh rules still applied. But this was not war as they knew it. A chilling new darkness was descending upon these captured souls. In the brutal cold, a horrific choice was made. Humanity, it seemed, could vanish in a single terrible moment of pure evil. The Malmedy massacre began, a cold-blooded atrocity that would forever stain the winter snows. It was an act beyond savagery. The consequence was stark and deeply horrifying. Over 80 American prisoners murdered in cold blood, a crime against decency. News of Malmedy spread like wildfire, hardening Allied resolve. There would be no quarter, no mercy left, only vengeance. The Nazi German objective, Elsenborn Ridge, a high, formidable barrier, essential for their advance, but it wouldn't fall easily. Here, determined American defenders dug in, knowing this ground was sacred. They would hold, no matter the cost. The assaults came, relentless and brutal. Nazi German panzers and infantry battered the American lines, testing their very spirit. But the Americans at Elsenborn stood firm, a defiant wall of courage. Every inch was contested, every life fought for. The fighting was close, visceral, a desperate struggle for survival. The human cost of defiance was carved into the frozen earth. The consequence for Nazi Germany was immense. Their timetable was severely disrupted, their swift advance bleeding into a grinding halt. Elsenborn Ridge became a monument to American resolve, a vital stand, bought with blood and unimaginable courage, disrupting Nazi Germany's plans. To the south, another crucial point. St. Vith, a vital crossroads, became the next desperate prize for Nazi Germany's gamble. Nazi German forces pressed, encircling the town, demanding its surrender. But the American defenders refused to yield. Against overwhelming odds, they fought a desperate, stubborn defense. Each bullet, each grenade, a testament to their bravery. Even as the encirclement tightened, the American spirit held firm. Trapped, but not broken, they fought on, buying precious time. These were ordinary men, forced into extraordinary heroism. Each moment they held was a small victory against the advancing darkness. The consequence of their sacrifice was immense. St. Vith bought critical days, allowing the Allies to regroup and prepare. Their defiance at St. Vith, a small town engulfed in a winter bloodbath, proved indispensable, a testament to human endurance. The Ardennes Inferno had just begun, a brutal winter bloodbath. But the human spirit even then refused to be extinguished. The Ardennes, winter 1944. A brutal cold descended, cloaking the battlefield in white, yet hiding a storm of human will. This was a winter bloodbath, a last desperate gamble by Hitler's forces, plunging Europe into deeper despair. At its heart lay Bastogne, a small Belgian crossroads, suddenly thrust onto the world stage as a crucible of courage. The German 6th Panzer Army had bypassed it, but the town's strategic value meant it had to be taken, encircled now. Inside, Brigadier General McAuliffe and his 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, dug in, ready for anything. These were men forged in battle, weary but unbroken, facing overwhelming odds with a silent, steadfast resolve. Then came the German demand for surrender, a chilling message carried across the snow, threatening annihilation. McAuliffe's staff pondered a proper military response, but the general had a simpler, more potent answer. And so, the legendary reply echoed through the snowy forests. Nuts! A defiant roar against the storm. That single word encapsulated their iron will. Bastogne would not fall, not while these brave men drew breath. Under brutal conditions, shelled ceaselessly, freezing and outgunned, they held their ground with sheer grit. The wounded mounted, supplies dwindled. Every day was a testament to endurance, a battle against despair itself. Hunger gnawed, ammunition ran low, yet the resolve of the 101st Airborne only seemed to harden with each passing hour. Their greatest enemy, perhaps, was the relentless fog and cloud, grounding the vital Allied air support. Then, a critical shift. As if by a miracle, the weather began to clear, slowly, reluctantly revealing blue. The impenetrable gray blanket that shielded the Nazi German advance was finally, fatefully, beginning to lift. And with that clearing, the roar of engines, a symphony of salvation, filled the cold winter air. Crucial supply drops descended from the heavens, a lifeline of ammunition, medicine, and much-needed food. Hope surged through the beleaguered garrison. They were not forgotten, their valiant stand had been seen. But more than supplies, the clear skies unleashed devastating Allied air power, a terror from above for Nazi Germany. The ground shook with the fury of precision strikes, turning the tide against the exposed German columns. Miles away, a fiery spirit burned bright. General Patton, a man of audacious courage, plotted his next move. His Third Army, engaged elsewhere, performed an incredible feat, a daring 90-degree pivot, defying military convention. Through snow and ice, his legions drove, a relentless push towards the besieged city, driven by an urgent purpose. Every mile was a testament to sheer will, every soldier a link in this desperate, historic race against time. They battled through stubborn Nazi German resistance, smashing through defenses that had seemed impenetrable. Inside Bastogne, the sounds of distant battle grew, a faint rumble promising relief, igniting the dying embers of hope. Finally, on December 26th, a thin corridor was opened. Bastogne was relieved, its iron will rewarded. The heroic stand had paid off. A bond of shared suffering, now a bond of victory, forged in the Ardennes. Meanwhile, the Nazi German spearhead had reached its high water mark near Celles, their gamble nearing its end. The grand offensive was sputtering. Critical fuel shortages plagued their mighty panzers, immobilizing their power. Without the vital black gold, the unstoppable blitzkrieg ground to a halt, a fatal flaw in their grand design. The supply lines, already stretched thin, buckled under the strain, choking the life out of the offensive. Strategic blunders and logistical nightmares began to unravel the Nazi German High Command's desperate plans. In a final desperate gamble, on New Year's Day 1945, the Luftwaffe launched Operation Bodenplatte, a massive air assault. Their objective? Cripple Allied air power, a bold, sudden strike that caught many by surprise. The skies erupted into chaos, a furious battle as Allied fighters scrambled to meet the onslaught. Both sides paid a heavy price. Many brave young men from both sides met their fate in the winter air. Though it inflicted damage, Bodenplatte bled the Luftwaffe dry, depleting their irreplaceable experienced pilots. This final desperate gamble ultimately failed, signaling the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany's offensive. The tide had turned in the Ardennes, a winter bloodbath ending with an Allied counterpunch, a testament to enduring spirit. As Christmas faded, a quiet resolve hardened. The Allies, battered but unbowed, began to weave a counterpunch, a coordinated effort born of grim determination. Across the frozen front, men gathered, their numbers swelling. British and American forces, side by side, prepared to push back against the winter's cruel grip. From the north, Field Marshal Montgomery meticulously planned his thrust. His disciplined forces were ready to engage, to roll back the desperate Nazi Germany advance. To the south, Patton's Third Army, a swift, relentless spear, turned north. They charged through the ice, aiming to pinch off the German salient. But winter itself was the most brutal adversary. The deep snow swallowed sound, numbed limbs, and turned every step into an exhausting struggle. The biting cold was relentless, a silent killer. Men fought not just the enemy, but the cruel, freezing winds that pierced their very souls. Every forest, every rise became a battleground. Hand to hand, house to house, the fighting was intimate, savage, etched forever in memory.
Artillery thundered, shaking the frozen earth. Yet, amid the chaos, an unwavering courage burned, a quiet defiance against overwhelming odds. Slowly, painstakingly, the lost ground was reclaimed. Towns like St. Vith, once symbols of German advance, fell back into Allied hands. The relief of Bastogne, a beacon of American resilience, lifted spirits. The isolated defenders had held, proving the unbreakable will of the human spirit. From both north and south, the Allied forces squeezed, like a vice closing around a desperate foe. The Bulge began to shrink.
Still, Nazi Germany fought with desperate ferocity. They knew this was their last stand, a gamble for survival against the inevitable. Their supply lines, already stretched thin, now crumbled under the Allied pressure. Fuel and ammunition, vital for war, became a luxury. With clearing skies, Allied air power returned. They ravaged German columns, severing lifelines, making retreat an agonizing gauntlet of fire.
The eyes of the world turned to Houffalize, a small Belgian town. It was here the two pincers of the Allied counterattack would meet. On January 16, 1945, they met. A simple handshake, a shared glance, signifying the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany's desperate gamble.
The Bulge was crushed, sealed tight. Tens of thousands of German soldiers, once advancing, now found themselves trapped, their fate hanging in the bitter cold. The retreat became a rout, a desperate scramble for survival. Nazi Germany's last major offensive was crumbling into chaotic disarray. Across the Ardennes, they left behind a trail of destruction. Abandoned tanks, heavy artillery, the very sinews of war, now useless.
The Allies pushed relentlessly, reclaiming every inch of sacred ground. The momentum had shifted, irrevocably, toward inevitable victory. By January 25th, the Bulge was gone. Nazi Germany's final, desperate surge had been absorbed, repelled, and ultimately shattered. The human cost was staggering. Over 100,000 German soldiers lost their lives, were wounded, or captured. A generation's sacrifice.
And the irreplaceable material, thousands of tanks, vehicles, and aircraft. Resources Nazi Germany simply could not replenish at this late stage. This was Hitler's last gamble, a catastrophic failure. His final reserves, his last desperate hope, had been squandered in the winter bloodbath.
The Battle of the Bulge bled Nazi Germany dry. It consumed the last of their men, their machines, their will to continue. The Western Front now lay open. With no reserves left, the path to the heart of Nazi Germany was cleared, accelerating the end.
While the Ardennes raged, the Soviet Union's advance continued, unchecked. Nazi Germany was now truly caught in an inescapable vice, east and west.
The winter bloodbath of 1944 undeniably hastened the war's conclusion. It shattered the illusion of Nazi strength, revealing their true, exhausted state. Its legacy endures, a testament to courage, sacrifice, and the strategic folly of desperation. A solemn reminder for generations to come. The unforgiving winter of 1944 in the Ardennes left an indelible scar. A silent, chilling testament to immense human cost. Beyond strategies and grand battles, we recall the faces, the silent suffering, and the lives forever changed by winter's cruel embrace. This brutal engagement yielded painful lessons, a desperate gamble that ultimately drained Nazi Germany's last strength, sealing its fate.
Yet amidst the harrowing chaos, an unwavering spirit of allied resilience emerged. They held the line, defying all expectations. Hitler's final desperate push was an act of profound futility, a tragic waste of life against an inevitable rising tide.
We reflect upon their incredible sacrifice, the sheer heroism of ordinary men in extraordinary circumstances, a legacy that forever endures. The Bulge reminds us of war's universal truths, the cost, the courage, and humanity's endless struggle for a fragile peace. Their courage echoes through history, a solemn reminder of human endurance and the enduring spirit that fought for freedom. If these stories touch your heart, please subscribe, like, and share. Let's keep these vital lessons alive for generations.